Hello friends, welcome back to our channel Tech India. This is going to be lecture 5th for the series that we have started for DBMS course for exams and placements. In this video, we will discuss the topic architecture of DBMS. So let's start with our topic architecture of DBMS. The DBMS design depends upon its architecture. The basic client server architecture is used to deal with a large number of PCs, web servers, database servers and other components that are connected with network. DBMS architecture depends upon how users are connected to the database to get their requests done. Now, types of DBMS architecture. There are several types of DBMS architecture that we use according to the usage requirement. Types of DBMS architecture are discussed here. 1-tier architecture, 2-tier architecture, 3-tier architecture. So, these are the important architecture of DBMS. Now, 1-tier architecture. In 1-tier architecture, the database is directly available to the user. The user can directly sit on the DBMS and use it. That is, the client, server and the database are all present on the same machine. This setup is simple and is often used in personal or standalone application where the user interact directly with the database. And here is the example of it. A Microsoft Excel spreadsheet is a great example of 1-tier architecture. Now, advantage of 1-tier architecture. 1-tier architecture is the most simple architecture to set up as only a single machine is required to maintain it. Cost effective. Definitely it will be cost effective. No additional hardware is required for implementing 1-tier architecture, which makes it cost effective. Easy to implement. 1-tier architecture can be easily deployed and hence it is mostly used in small projects. You can see the 1-tier architecture here. This is your device if you consider it as a whole, and in the same device your local database is there and your application is there. So, you will use just one machine to manage your local database and your application, and that will be called as 1-tier architecture. And now 2-tier architecture. 2-tier architecture is similar to a basic client server model. The application at the client end directly communicates with the database on the server side. APIs like ODBC and JDBC are used for this interaction. The server side is responsible for providing query processing and transaction management functionalities. On the client side, the user interfaces and application programs are run. The application on the client side establishes a connection with the server side to communicate with DBMS. For example, a library management system used in schools or small organizations is a classic example of 2-tier architecture. Client layer, that is tier 1. This is the user interface that the library staff or users interact with. For example, they might use a desktop application to search for books, issue them or check due dates. Now, database layer, that is tier 2. The database servers store all the library records such as book details, user information and transaction logs. So, this is the difference between client layer and database layer. The layer which directly interacts with the user is client layer, that is tier 1, and the layer which has all the information that contains all the important data is the tier 2, which is directly not visible to the user, but it can be accessed using the client layer. Client layer sends requests like searching for a book to the database layer, which processes it and sends the result back. This separation allows the client to focus on the user interface while the server handles the data storage and retrieval. You can see the 2-tier architecture here. One will be database server there. It will not be in your same machine that you are using. It will be somewhere else and it will be connected with your machine using a network. So, it will be easy for you to access it. You will be able to access it with your local machine, but its location will be different from your local machine. In simple word, you can say it is another machine, it is another machine, or you can say it is another server, it is another server. So, this is the actual representation of 2-tier architecture. And now, advantages of 2-tier architecture. Easy to access. 2-tier architecture makes easy access to database, which makes fast retrieval. Scalable. We can scale database easily by adding clients or upgrading hardware. Low cost. 2-tier architecture is cheaper than 3-tier architecture and multi-tier architecture. Easy deployment. 2-tier architecture is easier to deploy than 3-tier architecture, and it's simple because 2-tier architecture is easily understandable as well as simple because of only 2 components. However, in tier 1 architecture, there was just one component, but here will be two. Now, 3-tier architecture. In 3-tier architecture, there is another layer between the client and the server. The client does not directly communicate with the server. Instead, it interacts with an application server, which further communicates with the database system, and then the query processing and transaction management takes place. This intermediate layer acts as a medium for the exchange of partially processed data between the server and the client. This type of architecture is used in case of large web applications. For example, e-commerce store. User: you can visit an online store, search for a product and add it to your cart. Processing: the system check if the product is in stock, calculates the total price and applies any discount. And now the functioning of database. The product details, your cart and the order history are stored in the database for future reference. So, this is the workflow of e-commerce store. Now, advantages of 3-tier architecture. Enhanced scalability. Scalability is enhanced due to distributed deployment of application servers. Now, individual connection need not to be made between the client and server. Now, most important, data integrity. 3-tier architecture maintains data integrity. Since there is middle layer between the client and server, data corruption can be avoided or removed. Security. 3-tier architecture improves security. This type of model prevents direct interaction of the client with the server, thereby reducing access to unauthorized data. So, in this video we have discussed 3-tier of architecture: 1-tier, 2-tier, 3-tier. So friends, this was all in this video. Thanks a lot for watching this video. Have a great learning.